I think it's a typical story of a privileged man who happened to be down his luck, and he learned of a young peasant girl whose uncle had been saving a dowry for her. So he courted her, and she fell hopelessly for him and became besotted, and he persuaded her to steal her dowry from her uncle and elope. So that was the doomed, ill-fated pairing, lost out and fell foul of treachery and murderous intentions.
The Irish are famous for their stories. Some are myths and legends, while others are historical and factual. But there's one story in particular that seems to have garnished all of these together: the Colleen Bawn. The Colleen Bawn is a name associated with the murder of Ellen Hanley by her husband John Scanlon and his servant friend Stephen Sullivan during the summer of 1819. We asked the author of the Colleen Bawn book, Patrick T. Fitzgerald, to come into our studio and have a talk with us, to give us a better understanding of the facts associated with this story.
The Scanlons were known as squireens or half-sirs or middlemen, and he was trading on a reputation, and he was expected to marry in an arranged marriage to keep land leases and lines of finance going. And he learned of a young peasant girl whose uncle had been saving a dowry for her, and it was possibly a mixture. We believe now he was 28 years of age and Ellen Hanley was not yet 16, and it really wasn't a fair match at all. So he courted her, and she fell hopelessly for him and became besotted, and he persuaded her to steal her dowry from her uncle and elope. And on Carrick Island, near Ballylongford, County Kerry, there was a battlement built, and I believe there was a boarding house developed to cater for the lodgers, for the workers, and to feed them. And that very boarding house was still in place in 1819 when Ellen Hanley, who had eloped with John Scanlon, they got blown ashore during bad weather crossing the Shannon and spent the night there. And a key witness was an Ellen Walsh, who had asked John Scanlon to carry her across the Shannon from Kilrush back to Glen. It appears that she was only in Ellen Hanley's company for probably that 24 hours, and in return for the free ride home, she was to attend on John Scanlon's young wife. And sometime the following day was the last time that Ellen Walsh saw Ellen Hanley. So really for less than 24 hours, but it appears young Ellen Hanley left an impression and endeared herself with her innocence and her youth to the older Ellen Walsh. And these happenstances led to testimony and identification of a corpse later, which ultimately led to securing convictions against John Scanlon and his foot servant Stephen Sullivan. This honeymoon had been going on around the Shannon estuary, sailing the boat around, and Stephen Sullivan would be sent off by his master John Scanlon to take Ellen Hanley here, there and everywhere, and he joined them, and I suppose they were ambling through the summer. So it was probably something that built over a few weeks, and John Scanlon was being put under pressure to rid himself from this peasant wife. And he formed the opinion, and once he had formed the opinion, he plotted the murder. So John Scanlon bought whiskey and got Stephen Sullivan very drunk and threatened that he would kill Stephen Sullivan if Stephen didn't carry out the murder. So around the 16th of July 1819, John Scanlon gave instructions to Stephen Sullivan to take Ellen Hanley out in the boat, and it appears he had a gun, but it didn't work, and he used it as a club and battered her to death, and took rings from her and bound her with a rope and a rock and threw her overboard. The Night of Glen played a key role in the story, and it appears that he was embroiled in and asked to get involved in a fracas about a cloak that was pledged in Glen for a quart of whisky. Now, this was after Ellen Hanley went missing, and the cloak, it appears, was hers along with other clothes. And soon after, news came through from Clare that a body had washed up. And the night, even though Clare was outside his jurisdiction, decided he was going to sail over and look into this. And he rounded up some local people on the pier to help him sail across, and he brought Ellen Walsh with him. And one of the people he brought across was a Jack Keys, and Jack Keys sold John Scanlon a boat a few weeks earlier and also gave him a rope, and it was a key piece of evidence. And there was a splicing in the rope that was used to bind the remains of Ellen Hanley and bind a stone to her and sink her in the Shannon estuary. And the stone must have come loose because she floated ashore. But it was fortuitous that Jack Keys was asked to come along, because during the inquest he saw the rope and he boldly stated, "I know that rope. I'd recognise my own splicing anywhere." And that became one of the key pieces of evidence after. The other key piece of evidence was supplied by Ellen Walsh. Now, the body had been in the water for at least 6 weeks at this stage and was bereft of hair, and the skin was beginning to peel off, and all that was left in the body was a salt-stained bodice and the teeth. And Ellen Walsh, when she was asked by 3 coroners, 3 magistrates, held what was an impanelled beach jury, and Ellen Walsh recalled that Ellen Hanley had double-eye teeth, and the 3 magistrates were satisfied between the evidence of Ellen Walsh about the teeth and Jack Keys about the rope, that they issued a verdict and a finding that John Scanlon and Stephen Sullivan were guilty of willful murder. And those two men, they were on the run and they were caught and tried separately. So John Scanlon was tried and convicted and hanged before Stephen Sullivan was apprehended, and he subsequently confessed to the entire plot, and he was duly convicted and hanged also. I'm not surprised that you heard about it, because quite a few compilations of Ireland's most favourite murders all list the Colleen Bawn as number 1. And it kind of has to be, really. The involvements from Queen Victoria's love of Boucicault's play, and the local scenes, the crowds gathering for the trials and for the procession to the gallows green, and for the fact that there was a manhunt and there was separate captures, separate trials, separate hangings, and the adaptations that followed. It is a story that there's a devoted number of Limerick historians and Colleen Bawn enthusiasts that they won't hear of any other story.
In the golden fields of Limerick, close by the Shannon stream, there lives a maid that holds my heart and haunts it like a dream. With shining showers of golden hair, as gentle as a fawn, her cheeks would make the red rose pale. My darling